Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're chatting with Milan Tasevski, a board game designer and founder of Archona Games. Milan has launched 10 Kickstarter campaigns since 2015, and his newest project, Pest, is currently live on Kickstarter. Milan, welcome to the binge. How you doing?
Thank you, James, for the invitation. I'm doing great. It's great to be here.
And hopefully I got the name right. I don't know. We just practiced it right before we went on air. Oh, I have so much trouble with names.
It's great. Yeah. It's okay.
So first of all, where are you joining us from? So obviously you're not here in Canada. So where are you joining us from?
I'm from Macedonia, Skopje to be exact, the capital city of Macedonia. So I think most people don't know where Macedonia is located, but it's right above Greece. So, it's a small country, and yeah.
And in the intro, I mentioned that you've done 10 campaigns. So you've obviously been doing this for a while, 2015. So I guess we're 7 years in now. That's actually quite a number of campaigns that's more than one a year. So that's actually quite a lot. It's been pretty busy for you.
Yeah, exactly. We launched the first campaign for my first game, my first official game, board game design that I did, Small Star Empires. We launched that in 2015, around March, I believe. And since then, we've been doing this for a while. A lot of campaigns, and it's been a fun ride so far. So.
Yeah. And where did this all begin? And often when I'm talking to designers or even publishers, most of them didn't start in board games out of school. Most of them were doing something else as a career, and they kind of somehow got into it. What were you doing before board games?
So for me, at least, games were, like a big passion and big part of my life since childhood. So,
yeah.
I remember my father, he traveled a lot. He has a karate club, and, he was, participating in all those tournaments around Europe. And when he traveled, when he came back, sometimes he would just bring some board game, like battleships or I don't know, Monopoly or that sort of stuff. So
yeah,
I've kind of played games since childhood, like board games and everything. Then of course video games, and I don't know, it has been a big part of my life since I was a child. And then after a while, I just started thinking about what if I do my own game. That was maybe 10 to 15 years ago. So I've dabbled into game design, like a hobby before this. Then I went to work in a video game company here in Skopje. I was game designer there for a year, but that was right before actually we started Archona Games. So after a year, I realized that I just want to do my own games, publish my own games and everything. So that's how everything around Small Star Empires came to be, and we pursued with Kickstarter, and the rest is history.
Now it's interesting. I think you're probably either the fourth or fifth guest I've talked to that was in the video game industry, right? Designing on the video game side, and then moved over into what I call the analog, or the more the tactile gaming. Was it a big leap for you, or was it something where was it an escape, did you find, doing the board games from the digital world? Because I know often people that are in front of computers all day, the last thing that they want to do when they get home is get on a computer. Or what was it to kind of bridge that? Or did you see that almost like a stepping stone to get you into the board game industry?
Yeah, well, so to be honest, I think that, I was more into board games. I mean, during my entire life, I'm more into board games than video games.
Yeah.
So when I worked for that company, for a year, I just realized that I love video games, don't get me wrong, but and I love working on them. But at that time, my passion was bigger for board games. So it wasn't like a very difficult choice for me to do. I just, went ahead and switched over actually switched back to board games because before working for that company, I, as I said, I did some designs myself uh, before working there. So yeah, it was no brainer for me, definitely.
How was that struggle when you first started out? Because most people, it's a huge learning curve, right? Going from
Yeah, yeah,
design to actually publishing to then Kickstarter, which is another beast on its own. How,
yeah.
what was that learning curve like for you?
Um, I think uh, it has, at least for me, in my experience, it has something to do with my, like my personality and how I actually do some things in my life. So, for example, back then I was, like really, let's say, shy to show my designs or my ideas to people and everything. To actually get someone to try whatever I was working on. So what can you expect? People are gonna like it or not. You're mostly afraid that they're not gonna like it, right? And so I guess, like, I've learned from that experience that it's better to share with people, as
Yeah.
much as possible, at least your close ones, your friends, your family. So you can just, as a designer, at least when you're a young designer, you don't have to be afraid, to share what you've worked on with those people, and it will give you a bit more, uh, it will loosen you up, I think, in your, next projects that you want to work on or whatever. So
Yeah, that's interesting actually, because often when I'll talk to designers, especially early in their careers, they'll say, "Well, I was afraid to share my design, not because I was afraid of what people would think of me, which is what we're talking about here, but
yeah,
more along the lines of I'm afraid somebody's going to steal my idea." And it is very, very rare that somebody's going to steal your idea. Most board games are combinations and permutations of games that came before them, where people take an idea from over here, an idea over here, combine them, create something cool, and then wrap it in a cool theme.
yeah,
And there's so many themes. It's like, okay, guess what? Pirates is not an original idea, right?
yeah, exactly.
There are so many pirate games, right?
Yeah,
Space is
yeah,
not
yeah,
unique, right? So
yeah,
there's going to be some duplication there. And the advice for most people in the industry is don't be afraid to share. No one's going to steal your idea, and you will gain way more from sharing than you will lose.
exactly.
Either by building early community, getting early buy-in, getting great advice from people. They're going to, maybe point out some things that you didn't see.
Exactly.
That all is part of that development process. And the more you can kind of open yourself up, the
Yeah.
better you're going to be overall, I guess, right?
Yeah, and I think, I'm talking about me, for example. I
Yeah.
think I'm a work in progress still on that part because I often find myself like, yeah, even with all the experience that I have so far as a publisher and as a designer, I still struggle with it sometimes. So I just sometimes I'm just like, okay, why are you afraid to share this with someone, with people? Like,
Yeah.
just do it and just sit down, play a game, have fun, and learn something along the way. So
Yeah, just this past weekend I was at the Toronto Protospiel. It was put on by
mhm,
Joe Slack, and it was interesting. We were showcasing a game that we feel is probably 97% there, and there was a wide swath of people. So day one, I had a lot of hardcore gamer designers that were playtesting the game,
yeah,
and they cut deep. Right, when they give you feedback, they go in deep. And I think it is an evolution, because I know myself 4 years ago would have seen that interaction very differently than I did this past weekend, right?
yeah,
And this past
yeah,
weekend was very much listen, taking notes, and it's like, you know what, I'm just going to get it down on paper now, and I'm going to think on it. And then the next
yeah,
day we play tested, and some of those things from the day before came up in a different way, but thematically what the people were talking about was kind of the same thing. And
yeah,
so, it's important to kind of get these different pockets and expose yourself to people, right? And I tell you, getting other game designers to review your game, it doesn't get more exposed than that, right?
yeah,
Because they're not shy.
exactly, exactly.
So
Yeah, and yeah, I think, and as you said, you just sit down and try uh, to work around, what feedback you're going to you have received so far. But I'm talking with my developers always that sometimes people give. I don't mean to be rude here, but sometimes people can give meaningless feedback about something,
Sure.
right? So if, for example, some part of the game is how you intended and everything, and you like it, and someone says no, that's not good or whatever, so you have to be a little bit thick-skinned on with feedback and everything. But yeah, always take it as a constructive criticism, and then uh, see what you can use from that, I guess.
Yeah, there's two things that came out of that for me. So one was, I think, if you hear the same thing come up from multiple people who are playing the game at different times, so they're not interacting with each other, you 100% have to listen to that, right?
Yeah,
you got to listen to that. You got to internalize and say, okay, is there something here we need to address? Because if I'm hearing it from multiple people, that's a gift, right? That is a gift to you, that feedback has brought something to your attention that you didn't have before. So that's good. For me, I find where I used to run into that kind of feedback in the past, where someone would say shred a game that I was working on, and I'd say, well, and afterwards I'd be like, well, they hammered home the fact they didn't like the dice. There was dice in the game, and just absolutely crapped all over that. And what I found was it's important to set up the game at the beginning, the type of game it is, right? So for my company, we do more gateway type games, casual games. Our company tenets are, you have to be able to play the game in under an hour. You have to be able to explain it in 5 minutes or less. And people have to be able to win this game on their first play, have a chance of winning on their first play. Those are the three core tenets of our company. And all the games we create are within that. So what I did this time around is I prep people. I'd say, okay, before we start, here's the type of game this is, right? It's a Euro, but it's a light Euro. There's dice in the game. We love the dice. They're there purposefully. We're not changing dice, just to let you know. So if you hate dice, you might not even want to play test this because you're going to come in kind of jaded. So kind of setting the table, so to speak, so that they know, okay, I get what this guy's trying to create here. Yeah. Because if you don't do that, people will naturally start trying to turn your game into something that they want to play. They'll try to turn into their game, right? So those are things that I think that we're all kind of learning each time around to figure out how do I approach this a little bit differently to ultimately cull out the best possible information from the people you're interacting with so that you can improve what you're creating, right?
Yeah, exactly. And a similar point to this is that not all people like all games, right? So if you have a card game and you have it, someone that playtest as someone that doesn't like card games, then what kind of feedback you're going to get from them, right?
Yeah,
I don't think it will be that useful feedback.
There's two genres I can think of like that. One is take that, right? So any kind of take that mechanic. There's certain people that absolutely hate anything that's take that. And co-op is the other one. I would say that fall in that camp, right? And I'm one of those guys. I'm not a big fan of co-op games. But I think that it's like beer, right? People say they don't like beer. They haven't tried every beer. So you never know that there might be one out there that you actually like. So this idea for Pest, where did this come from? How did you guys come up with this idea? It's super cool, right? I'm going to, on my screen for people who are watching on the replay or live, I'm going to show some of the imagery here. Super cool artwork. I mean, it sucks you in right away. Where'd the idea come from? And I'm hoping you're not going to say COVID-19, but you might say COVID-19.
Yeah. So it's not COVID-19 actually. So we are just the publisher of the game and the developers of the game, Archona Games. So the designers are coming from Germany, Kai Stark and Thomas Nielsen. Just want to say a quick hi to them. They had they pitched me this game even before COVID. I think it was 1 or 2 years before COVID actually started. So at that time we did some other projects, I think, and we were kind of busy with those projects. So I just, I immediately liked their prototype. I really liked what it did for me. So, I just signed it immediately. And then I said, guys, look, it's going to take a while probably to get this one out because, I had this vision of a bit bigger game than that they had, like the prototype, a bit more immersive world, a bit, good theme connected with the game mechanics themselves. So, we've worked on it quite for quite a while. I think it was year or year and a half before the Kickstarter. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I think as a review I was watching from Rattle Runs Through, where his kind of final thoughts, he was saying like this is a huge game, not just immersive in terms of gameplay, but physically it's a huge game. Like it takes up
yeah,
the entire table, right? There's a lot of stuff
yeah.
there. Um, when you're developing this game, how much thought did you put into that? Like, because you kind of have the two sides, right? One is how do I make sure it's fit on most tables, but on the other side, you want to make sure that you're pulling people into that immersive world. And one great way to do that is actually to have the world kind of playing it in front
Yeah,
of them, right?
yeah, exactly. So I'm gonna go back a bit with the feedback part
Sure.
that we talked about. So actually, one of the feedback that we received about the game is, yeah, that the main board is quite large, and this is one thing that, as you mentioned, we listened, we heard from a lot of people, and actually we're going to downsize the board a bit, and we did split it to make it more modular, so people can set it up on on their own terms, on in their own space at home or wherever they play. So that's something that we actually heard from people a lot, and then we implemented that feedback. But I'm gonna get back to your question about the game. I think when we set out to create the product, we wanted to create a massive world.
Yeah.
Not just with story, with the story and theme, but with the table presence.
Yeah.
And we had we showcased Pest at Essen this year. When most people came to the booth to see the game, they were like, "Oh my God, this looks really really good because it's huge table presence. Everything looks really well. The theme is very well represented on with the artwork. We have the capital city miniature, which is in the middle of the board, which kind of give this centerpiece moment of the game. And I think we've done a really good job around that. So I'm really happy with the results on that.
Yeah, it looks super cool. And I think I'd be remiss to not say first, congratulations. I mean, you guys
Thank you
are doing
so
very well in
much.
this campaign. I'm going to put this in Canadian dollars because it's quite frankly the only way I can see it.
Yeah,
You're at $137,000 on a goal of 41,000. So obviously smashed that goal. You still got
yeah,
16 days to go. So this is obviously going to, not only is it started strong, but it's clearly going to end strong. I think this is probably going to be your biggest game. I think if I'm looking at your portfolio, is this got it? It's got to be the
exactly.
biggest one, right?
Yeah. In all terms, and around the company, it will be the biggest game as a product and as a Kickstarter as well. So
Yeah.
I hope at least by the end. For example, the previous Kickstarter ended up around 2,000 backers. So I think this will
Yeah.
probably go a little bit higher than that.
Yeah, I was looking through your portfolio. I mean, you guys got a good batting average. I mean, you guys have done well on most of your campaigns. So congrats on that too. You've obviously figured out kind of the formula for building these out, and it does get very formulaic, right? When you talk about Kickstarter, there's certain things that if you do them
Yeah,
consistently, you should see certain results, right? Obviously,
yeah,
timing of when you launch and other games that are on Kickstarter, and the type of game you're putting forward, those all contribute to as success factors. But certainly there's things you can do to kind of ensure that at least you're coming out pretty strong. Can you explain kind of the gist of how this game, how you play this game? What is this game?
So in Pest, you are the leader of one of the great houses of an empire, which has unfortunately been struck by a devastating plague. And what you're trying to do is you're going to go around, send your plague doctor, try to gather sick people around the board, put them in your quarantine in your city, so you can later use all the actions that are available to heal those people, employ them in your city to work, maybe send them as diplomats to the capital city, that big miniature in the middle of the board. And all of this is done to try to kind of save the people, save the empire, rebuild the empire, the infrastructure. Also, you want to. There are like these agenda cards that we have on the side of the board. There are like public objectives set forth by the council. So you're also going to try to complete them as much as possible. And I would say it's, in terms of, gameplay mechanics, I would say it's a Euro game with worker placement and action selection mechanic. The grid that we have on the player board, that was something that I really liked with the, in the prototype of the designers, and that was, something that we kept, like that's the core mechanism of the game.
Yeah.
So
Do you,
actually, when you put a worker on one of the spaces on the grid, you trigger two actions, and that's really, really interesting to play out, because each turn you play out like you have to solve like a tiny puzzle, what to do for your turn and how to maximize your efforts.
yeah, I'm gonna hone in on that a little bit because I saw that mentioned by a lot of the reviewers. Thought that that was really cool. So for people who are listening, imagine like a tic-tac-toe board where you've got a 3x3 grid, and along the rows you have certain actions, and along the columns you have certain actions, and you're essentially placing your worker in one of those squares. So it's triggering whatever row that square is in at the same time as the column that square is in, and then those two actions are what your actions are for that round. It's super cool and definitely innovative, I would say. A lot of people really thought that was it was cool, and it's neat when you can do that, right? When you can have a game that's kind of got this new kind of mechanic that's kind of doing things a little bit different. It often gets people excited, and you can see that in the
Yeah.
reviews as well. People are getting really excited about it.
Yeah.
This game is again got a lot, and I was just scrolling over the page when you were talking there. There's a lot of stuff in here, like a lot. I gotta imagine this is a pretty costly game to make.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
He's like, oh yeah, um,
uh,
and that becomes a challenge, I think, too, right? When you have a game that's this robust with components and pieces and so forth. In the development and manufacturing of the game, what are some of the things that you do as a company? You know, obviously you've done 10 games, so you've got, some history behind this. So for people maybe out there that are looking at doing their own games, how do you guys approach this to ensure that you can kind of get this, for lack of a better word, contained and manageable, right? From an execution standpoint, because when you get to the fulfillment stage and the manufacturing stage, it's a lot of stuff, right?
yeah. 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 I mean, I don't think that we do something, special as a company. I mean, I hope that we're doing, stuff as most companies do in the background with the production process and everything. So, we try to, when we price a product, for example, we try to stick to that, 5x or 6x landed costs on the game.
Yeah.
But we know that's not possible always. So sometimes, the game itself, like how does the game look actually? What feelings does the game give to people when they see it for the first time? That's also important, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say is that you cannot price a game that actually looks like a $30 game. You cannot price it like $60, right? So I think that's something that we are thinking about a lot when we price our games, and when we work out, the cost behind the game and everything. So we try to find the perfect balance between, a good cost, good quality, and good price for customers too. So
Yeah.
there's no special thing that we do. We just think about it a lot, and then we just come up with something, and it's different for each game, I guess. So
Yeah. For the listeners out there, when you say the 5x, explain that to them. What do you mean by that?
yeah, so for a game to be profitable, and for you to have like the ability to make another print run of a game, you need to have it at least like price it 5x at 5x sorry, I'm
Five
just
times. It's good.
rambling
Yep.
right now. 5 times more than the actual game costs to produce. So sometimes I've seen a lot of a lot of talk that sometimes you need to include the freight cost as well in that, which is, I think it's a good idea actually. So you get, the manufacturing cost plus the freight cost of the game to get it to a warehouse, either in the US or EU or whatever,
Yep.
wherever, and then you multiply that by 5, and then you get your price for the game. But as I say, I don't think it's that simple sometimes. Like sometimes you can go even higher. Let's say that if the product looks like that, and if it gives that vibe, and if it gives that gameplay and everything, if you have like a immersive product, let's say. So sometimes you can go a bit higher, but sometimes you cannot, simply put a game that costs very little to produce and looks at least cheap. You
Yeah.
cannot make it, expensive.
Yeah. Part of the
But
challenge, I was going to
yeah,
say with that,
yes,
the 5X, if you're not doing at least 3X, you're probably losing money, right?
oh yeah,
And I think sometimes people don't consider that, right? So you have your cost
yeah,
of the factory and they think, oh, wow, okay, well, that's the cost to make the game. Well, you still have to get that into the countries.
yeah,
So your container costs, which have gone through the roof over the past several years, that's going to drive that
yeah,
up. You have import
yeah,
taxes, that's going to drive up that cost as well. Import
yeah,
tax going into Europe, for instance, is 20% of MSRP,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
it can, all those costs just for it to be physically ready to ship is significant. Then on top of that, you're looking at least a $15 per backer acquisition cost in your marketing dollars, plus any other kind of licensing deals that you've put
yeah,
in place there, whether using like social media amplifiers like BackerKit or so forth. So by the time you go through all of that, there's not a lot of meat left on the bone, right? Unless,
yeah,
as you're saying, you can get those multiples up. And that's why I think that you don't see a lot of lower cost games on Kickstarter that do big numbers, right? Because the economics do not allow people to pump a lot of money into the marketing for those games, right?
yeah,
So you
yeah,
probably got to be in around $50 plus in order to make any kind of
yeah.
play on the marketing end to get to those amplified numbers. So
Yeah, and
interesting.
I think that's something really. I mean, that's something that we felt actually as a company. So, our previous products, the small Empire series, they're like those smaller games, like you mentioned. Um, we started with around 35 MSRP for the first one, um, and as time passed from that game to now, we've raised the MSRP up to $42
Yeah,
only because a lot of stuff happening right now, right? COVID hitting hard, then the shipping, then all these things happening in the world, inflation. So and that's really important also to have in mind, right? So
yeah,
the economy in the world, and but I also wanted to add one more thing that maybe
sure,
people are thinking about this 5x or the multipliers, is that if you don't want to have the game in distribution, or don't want to make another print run, then you can be also fine with a little bit less than that if you want to
sure.
price your game a little less than that. And if you just want to do a Kickstarter game and just fulfill that game to Kickstarter backers and don't enter distribution or retail, that's totally fine, I guess. But be careful with your math. So it does pay off at the end, I guess. So
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with doing a small campaign, right? So if there's
yeah,
anyone out there
sure,
listening
sure,
that are saying, "Hey, I'd love to have a game that I put out there myself someday," just because my
sure,
dream always to create a game, you don't always have to do the large numbers. Like it's okay to do a campaign for like $8,000, $10,000. It's just having realistic expectations going in, but you can, that kind of funding can, pay for the manufacturing, right? So you actually have that physical game ready to go, and you can sell them through Amazon and things like that.
yeah.
As a company, where you guys go from here? This is now it's been 10 campaigns. Are you must be already working on kind of what the next one is coming after this one. Can you tease that at all, or are you able to talk about it?
Yeah, well, I cannot talk about it that much, but yeah, we want to, make a interesting, event around the, launching of that news. What I would say is it's another Euro game with a
Mm,
really cool and really unique action selection system again. And we're really, really interesting. The system is really interesting, and we've been working on it for the past few months on it as well. I'm not gonna tease anymore. So that
Well,
would
can
be
you tell us
something that
when
I
you
could share.
when you're targeting on launching that game?
So somewhere between March and May next
Mm,
year, I hope. So we're gonna have some news pretty soon about that. So yeah,
yeah. Well, if there's anybody that wants to check out Pest, I've got a link in the show notes. Simply go there, click on it. It'll take you to the Kickstarter page. Likewise, if you go to Kickstarter and just type in Pest, you're going to find the game. It looks super awesome. You're going to love the graphics. Check it out. Congrats on the video at the front, too, because the video is well done as well. Milan,
thank you very much.
I want to wish you guys all the best on this campaign. I know that you're going to be happy with where it lands, and I can't wait to see this next project that's coming in the spring.
Thank you, James, and thanks again for the invitation. I hope we can talk again for the next project. So
Oh,
that
for
would
sure.
be awesome as well. Yeah.
All right, you take care.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you. You too.
This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply subscribe to our YouTube channel, Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.